to senators. I now welcome Senator the Honourable Anthony Chisholm, Assistant Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, and Mr Adam Fennessy, PSM, Secretary of the Department. Welcome, good morning, and also to your officers today. Now, did either of you have an opening statement that you'd like to make? Secretary?
Yeah, thank you, Acting Chair. Thanks, Senators. Thanks for the opportunity to make a short opening statement today and to give evidence to the committee. My focus as Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, or DAF, continues to be leading an efficient and focused department that delivers on Australian government priorities and, importantly, the needs of the Australian agriculture, fisheries and forestry sectors. Our staff work hard with expertise and passion, supporting the growth of these sectors, strengthening our biosecurity system and increasing sector resilience and sustainability, including through frontline service delivery at ports and airports. The value of Australian agriculture, fisheries and forestry sectors is back to $88 billion, including $76 billion in exports. This growth is critical for both the agriculture, fisheries and forestry sectors, as well as regional communities and supply chains into cities and towns across Australia. In the department, our internal transformation program is continuing to progress at pace to ensure we are a modern, efficient and effective organisation where people want to work. There are significant international opportunities and challenges for our sectors, and we're continuing to navigate increasing geopolitical complexity to protect, expand and diversify international market access for our agriculture, fisheries and forestry exports. Since my last appearance at this committee, there have been significant market access gains, particularly with China, including the resumption of the live rock lobster trade and the full resumption of red meat exports, with the lifting of suspensions for the last 2 Australian meat processing establishments. This marks the end of trade impediments that have been in place with China since 2020. Following the resumption of the live rock lobster trade on 24 December 2024, over 2.2 million kilograms have been exported to China. I would like to acknowledge the dedicated work of our staff and our overseas posted agricultural trade counsellors, alongside our government and industry colleagues, to deliver the technical work required to achieve these outcomes in a patient, calibrated and deliberate way. In 2024, we recorded a total of 83 technical market access achievements across the globe, including 28 actions to maintain and 7 actions to restore existing markets. These actions protected markets worth $2 billion, and opening 11 new markets and 37 improvements to existing market access. We are focusing on supporting the transition of the live sheep industry through implementation of the $139.7 million transition assistance package, with co-design workshops now underway with industry in Western Australia. We are happy to speak more to agricultural policy and trade outcomes today under Outcome 1. Our biosecurity system is crucial for protecting Australian livelihoods and strengthening the environment and economy, including in agriculture, tourism and trade. Biosecurity risks are growing, and with significant investments by the Australian Government, we are focusing on how we better prepare for, anticipate and respond to these risks, as well as provide stronger national leadership of the biosecurity system. One of the significant risks to our industries, economy and wildlife is high pathogenicity avian influenza, or HPAI. We are continuing our preparedness for the H5N1 variant that is in every continent except Australia, through implementing the Australian Government's over $100 million package through a One Health approach. We are also working closely with our state government colleagues on responding to the current H7N8 outbreak in northeast Victoria, which is a different H7N8 strain to the outbreak in 2024. We'll be happy to answer questions on biosecurity as part of Outcome 2. I continue to be proud of the hard work of DAF's 6,200 staff in 86 sites across the country and internationally. We look forward to providing further information to the committee on the critical work our staff are delivering for agriculture, fisheries and forestry industries. We've prepared a list of issues by outcome to help guide the committee's questions, and ensure we have the relevant officials available. We appreciate and understand the important oversight role of the Parliament and parliamentary committees, and Acting Chair, we stand ready to answer the committee's questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Secretary. You're happy to table that, I'm assuming? Yes?
Yep, we'll table it.
And we'll get a copy sent out to the senators. Now, Senator McKenzie.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you. Well, we're starting out in corporate. Secretary, can I just have an understanding of staffing increases since we last spoke?
Yes, so with staffing numbers and contractors, the first point I'll make, Senator, and then I'll hand to the Chief Operating Officer and our Chief People Officer, is that our staffing increases have been tied to increase in funding for service delivery. So the majority of the increases have been frontline biosecurity officers. In terms of the numbers, to your question, I'll pass to our Chief People Officer.
Yeah.
Senator Tim Simpson, Chief People Officer for the Department. So since 30 June, so this financial year, the staffing increase APS headcount-wise is 477 positions or people.
So an additional 477 positions?
Yep.
Yep. At a cost of what?
I'd have to call on...
Yes, we're set at estimates. How much are our 477 additional roles costing?
Senator Matthew Geisen, Chief Finance Officer at the Department. I'll have to get that detail for you with regards, because those positions will be across the organisation, will be tied to budget measures that are outlined in the PBS and the additional estimate statements.
Yep, so when can you get that for me, Mr Geisen?
I'll endeavour to get that for you as soon as possible, Senator, but I'm happy to highlight the measures that are associated with that.
I'm interested in the number of roles. It's the government's decision to do these budget measures. I'm interested in how many people and how much cost. So if you could get that figure as soon as possible, that would be much benefit. Thank you. I wanted to understand some of the contracts and consultants that the department's been using. Could you just please outline the contracts? I've got a figure of 89,000 for the contract for 1&1 proprietary limited support for the live sheep phase-out panel, and another contract for that organisation at $75,000. There's quite Artemis and Partners got $123,000. Davy Alistair Collin, almost $50,000. Concept 6, $84,000. They were cataloguing sheep submissions, I'm assuming, to the panel. Secretary?
Certainly some of the contracts that we've...
No, the Concept 6, 84 grand, it says cataloguing sheep submissions.
In terms of the quantum of contracts, we're very happy to answer that now. In terms of the broader implementation of live sheep, we're happy to go into the detail.
Contracts in corporate now. So someone who's done the procurement for the contracts, who has the actual information that these contracts were awarded against, will be in this section of your department.
Senator, certainly we have the details of those contracts.
Yes, you do.
In terms of the dollar value, which is probably what you're referencing off
yes.
AusTender. In terms of the actual detailed...
I don't need to know, like, at a granular level,
yep.
But when I read cataloguing sheep submissions, I'm made an assumption that submissions to the inquiry or to the analysis that was conducted around the closure of the live sheep trade.
Senator, I need to defer that to the relevant outcome officials.
Okay, but you awarded the contract?
Not me personally,
No?
Senator.
Who did? Your department?
Senator...
As Chief Financial Officer, who did?
Sorry?
Who did?
The appropriate PGPA delegate, Senator.
Yep, and who would that be in this case?
I can tell you the division in which it...
Yep.
So that would be in our traceability plant and live exports division.
Traceability. Right. Analysis of live sheep exports. We had episode 3, $319,000. TTF-KM Unit Trust got paid $286,000 for a functional review, but you're unable to tell me what that was functionally reviewing.
Senator, if you bear with me.
That was a November 23 to June 24 contract.
We certainly can go to the detail of some of the areas of the department. So TTF-KM Unit Trust was not in relation to the live sheep phase out. That was in relation to our Transformation Task Force.
Transformation Task Force?
Yes, which is the response of the department to the capability review led by the APSC.
Yes, got it.
Yep.
And similarly, the $362,500 that TTF-KM Unit Trust got, that was to do with the capability review?
Correct. That was the Transformation Task Force functional review, so response to capability review.
So I have, since the government came to power, the consultancy's contracts valued at $10,000 or more at almost $21 million. Is that correct, Secretary, or Mr Gayson?
For the total, I'll ask Mr Gayson to make comment on that.
So, Senator, in terms of consultancy contracts sorry, were you looking for this financial year?
No, since May 22.
I won't have it specifically to May 22, but I have it from the 1st of July 22. So for the 22-23 financial year, we entered into consultancy contracts, valued at $10.34 million. In 23-24, entered into consultancy contracts of $8.12 million. And for the financial year 2024-25 to 31 December, entered into $4.33 million worth of consultancy contracts.
4.33, and that's to end of calendar year?
Correct.
24.
Senator.
Okay. What about, when did you close the books off for this estimate? Or you haven't awarded any contracts?
We may have, Senator, but the data I have is to the end of December.
Okay. All right. And you can't give me anything other than the name and the contractor? You don't have any of the other information?
Not in terms of the
details.
contents within the actual contract itself.
Right. All right. So the one-on-one, who do I talk to there if I want the details of that contract?
Which contract are you? There are a number of contracts there.
I've got the $89,000 one and the $75,000 one.
So I think the $89,000 one is traceability plant and live export. And sorry, Senator, could you repeat the second one?
$75,500.
That is plant live animal exports, animal welfare and regulation.
So what else did one get awarded?
Senator, there are a range of contracts in 23-24. They include management advisory services, co-design services, project planning. I'm happy to table a list of those if that's...
if you could just table that, that would be brilliant. Thank you very much, Will. That will save us a lot of questions. I just wanted to go to diversity networks. Secretary, does the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry have any diversity network?
Senator, we certainly have diversity programs, and I'll ask our Chief Operating Officer to comment on networks themselves.
Good morning, Tess Bishop, Deputy Secretary, Strategy, Enterprise and Engagement. Senator, we have 6 inclusion networks in the department.
Mm-hmm. And can you outline what we're doing with inclusion? Disability?
Yes, Senator. The networks include First Nations, gender equity, pride, mental health awareness, care and disability, and our called networks.
3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so how do you engage with your staff through these networks? In other departments, there's been co-chairs that are paid a stipend. How does it run in agriculture?
So we have champions and we have chairs of each of the networks. Our champions are not paid. I understand that some of the other departments, the champions were paid an allowance. We're not doing that.
What level are your champions?
So the champions for each of the networks are the deputy secretaries.
Aye, DepSecs, champions. How much are your department secretaries paid?
Of the deputy secretaries' salaries.
Yep.
I will just get that for you, our salary range.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Paid much more than we are.
The range. So, Senator, the range for a deputy secretary as at 31 December is $372,648 to $438,575.
Sorry, 438?
438,575.
Does that include super?
That does not include super.
Okay, so how much with super?
I will have to get you those.
Mr Simpson?
Final.
I'd have to follow it up, but it's applicable for the APS super, so 15.4% for the majority, depending on the
Can
super
someone
fund.
do the quick maths on 438? We won't worry about the 575. 438,000, 15%. Nice for some.
So it'd be approximately $505,000.
$505,000. How much do you get paid, Minister?
About half that, I think.
About half that. Okay, but for that over $500,000, it is also an expectation that you're a champion of diversity.
Well, yes, it's part of our role, yes.
You'd think it'd be for everybody though, wouldn't it? But you're not paid an extra stipend?
No.
Good. That's good on over $500,000. Okay, what about our chairs of our networks? Do they receive a stipend?
No, Senator, they don't.
They do not. This is volunteer.
Yes,
yeah?
Senator, that's correct.
What about changes to their conditions of employment?
As in...
What if I'm holding a meeting?
I'll ask Tim
Does that have
Simpson.
to be done in work hours or out of work hours?
I think, Senator, that depends on the situation at the time. So it would be local management arrangements, but, I mean, there'd be some small amount of kind of hours allowable for them to undertake during work purposes, but the majority of the time for them would be outside of their core work time.
So how often do the diversity champions engage with the networks, or are they more about department secretaries rocking up at morning teas, etc., to actually show leadership and demonstrate that the leaders of the organisation take this stuff seriously and therefore driving culture change? And you're nodding, so I assume that's a yes. Thank you. But what engagement does the diversity champions have with the chairs, specifically the networks, or are they completely separate?
So, Senator, one of the subcommittees of our executive board is People and Culture Committee. Each of the inclusion networks, as you say, have a chair, and each of the champions, we meet regularly with the committees. And
how regularly is regularly?
I will fact check that and get back to you, but yeah, I will fact check it. And then the reports from each of our committees feed into the People and Culture Committee, and then that does ladder up to the executive board formal reporting arrangements.
And so that's
it's a part of our formal governance structure within the department.
Great. And so, Secretary, that is a regular line item in your executive meetings?
It's, in terms of our executive board, it's not what I'd call a regular line item, but it's part of the many different things that we oversight. Yep. And the one other comment I'll make is that we do our annual APS census through the APSC. So when issues like this come up through staff, we make sure we track it, respond to it, and put in place the right processes to take that into account.
Do you have digital notice boards in the department?
We certainly have screens like these, which put information up. So, yep, you could call them that.
Okay. What sort of diversity messaging what is the interaction between the cultural change you're trying to drive through your diversity champions and your co-chairs of these networks? How is that linked up with the messaging that you have going throughout the department?
So I'll make a comment and then I'll ask Tess to add to that.
And have we got the 477 cost yet? Okay.
Yeah. So we do have digital screens in our Canberra office as well as in other major offices around Australia, and they have a range of messages from work health safety, what's happening with budget, as well as things like diversity networks. So a range of rotating messages. Tess, could you add to that, please?
Senator, so we have digital screens at Agriculture House, our Moonee Ponds office and the post-entry quarantine facility in Melbourne. Since July of last year, we have had 100 items appear on these digital screens, and they cover everything. For example, Essential 8, which is about cybersecurity, information about a lunchtime learning series, fraud and corruption, biosecurity matters, spotlight on security, and a blood drive, the Secretary Awards. So it's all very much tied to corporate and governance or security or all the operations of the department.
Dwali? Eid?
I don't see that one on the list, Senator, but I'm very happy to table for you our
that would be
list
awesome.
of items.
And then, yeah. Okay, thank you. Sounds quite pragmatic, as usual, from the Department of Agriculture. Lovely to hear. 477? It's coming. All right, I shall move on to other matters. Yeah. Senator Canavan.
I'll take the call then. Thank you,
sure.
Chair.
Deputy Chair, you got the
just
call.
Wanted to check on climate-related disclosures. I believe that regime is starting this year, so I know this is a matter for cross-portfolio, but there's been a lot of interest in the extent to which businesses in primary production will have to report under the scheme. There's a bill that passed last year and requires certain entities to report their Scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. Does the department have a handle on how many primary production businesses will have to report their emissions, either to the government or to other entities captured by the scheme?
Deputy Chair, I'll check with the Chief Finance Officer. My understanding is most of this work will be done under the department under Outcome 1, so we're very happy to talk about it in detail then. I know also that Treasury presides over the broader process. In terms of the actual reporting, to go to your question.
I'm asking you because I thought it might be cross-portfolio, but...
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay,
Matt,
you'll have people in Outcome 1? Or?
Yeah, Outcome 1, so very happy to talk to that in Outcome 1.
All right, okay, we might come back to it then. I just also wanted to check, I suppose, on another matter which could involve Treasury, is the biosecurity levy. What is the status of that, particularly the government's policy in regards to the levy, the proposed levy?
Deputy Chair, that's we're very happy to go to the detail and outcome 2. In terms of the Chief Finance Officer role,
I suppose my question is probably more for the Minister. What's the government policy? My understanding is at the last sitting week, the bill was discharged from the notice paper, trying to get understanding for ourselves and the Australian people what the future government's plans are, if they are to be re-elected. Is it still the policy of the government to impose a levy on farmers to pay for biosecurity?
We won't be taking the biosecurity levy to the election.
So one thing about the election, but you won't be reintroducing.
We supported the discharge in front of the Senate.
Well, you didn't support the discharge. Why was it still on the notice paper? And it required the National Party to actually move the discharge. We had to suspend standing orders, Minister, to actually get it to debate in order to discharge it. So please don't spread misinformation to the agriculture sector that somehow the Minister and you as her spokesperson here in the Senate somehow supported the discharge of the bill because you had to be dragged kicking and screaming on the last day of the Senate.
All right, we just focus. Okay, everyone, thank you, everyone. Now we'll just get back to questions. Senator Canavan, you've got the call.
I just wanted to respond,
Sure,
to that.
Minister.
We know the opposition are only good at scare campaigns. It's all they've got. We see the shadow minister for scare campaigns sitting right next to you as well, in Senator Duniam.
He's not scary.
So we.
All right, come on.
And he'd have the Tasmanian division of the
All right,
Labor
let's
Party
get back. Let's just get back to the budget estimates.
It is good to hear.
Let's get back to estimates, everyone. Thank you.
It's good to hear that we've had a
it's
win. The
9:30
coalition has had a
morning,
win on this issue. Obviously, if the Labor Party had had their way, farmers would be paying this tax. But it was Liberal and National senators and members who fought against it. So. That is great, a great victory for the farming sector. Moving on, other cross-portfolio matters.
Chair, could you please bring Senator Brown under control?
I thought that was,
she's
I was
fine.
going to say the same about you, Bridget.
All right, come on,
it's
ladies.
his first day of the job.
Just calm down.
I just wanted to ask about the Food and Grocery Code. What was the involvement of the department in the drafting of the Food and Grocery Code of Conduct?
Deputy Chair, that is a whole of government example. I'm happy to go to the detail and outcome 1 if you're...
You were happy to do outcome 1. Okay, all right. Well, we'll leave that. The palm scheme. Are you going to flick me off? Are you going to palm me off to another outcome
1.
Palm scheme?
Yeah. Our good Chief Finance Officer would probably not be across the detail.
Okay, so is there anyone who might...
I think this is outcome 1.
Outcome
Again, it's
1.
cross-portfolio because it's obviously a matter for the Department of Immigration, but it has massive ramifications on agriculture. So outcome 1? Outcome
1, yep.
Okay, all right. Water buybacks. Is there any work being done on that?
So, outcome 1, mostly a DQ, Department of Climate Change, Environment, Energy, Water.
Yes.
But we could go to any of our involvement in outcome 1.
All right.
Secretary,
okay, we might.
Who has what? Is Fredo got water?
Yes, Secretary.
So you don't have regular interaction with the Secretary about those policy impacts on agriculture?
I do have regular catch-ups with the Secretary as well as the MDBA, but more as a whole-of-government department with critical interest in the outcome rather than the...
But that's why we're asking it in corporate.
Yeah.
That's why we're not going to outcome 1, because you've had the meetings.
Yes, but I will then engage with our senior executive from our outcome 1 area.
It doesn't seem, Mr Fennessy, that the Agriculture Department, the officials, nor the Secretary, and definitely not the Minister, is actually having any influence over the Labor Party's water policy to support regional communities and food production. Do you have any comment? What are you doing?
In terms of our corporate response, it's not narrowly construed a corporate issue. We are doing a lot under outcome 1 for the outcomes of agriculture. So we are doing a lot and happy to talk about it in more detail under that outcome.
Okay. come back to that.
Just sit and wait for the 477 figure before we go to outcome one, and we're happy to wait.
Just going back.
Shouldn't be that hard.
To the broader issues around the levy, I noticed that in my EFO the department has received more money, more funding to sustain its export regulatory functions. It's also part of that funding is $3.7 million to develop an ongoing sustainable export funding model. So what does that mean?
So I can ask the Chief Finance Officer to comment on the work that we're doing regarding that. So sustainable trade funding.
Sorry, so the Sustainable Trade Funding, Senator, is looking at the pricing in regards to exports cost recovery, and I think you'd be aware of the busting and congestion measure from a few years ago where there was stepped legislated price increases in exports. That task force is looking at the future cost of our export regulatory services, but certainly happy to defer any or elaborate on that further in the relevant outcome.
Well, maybe we'll start with how long is this meant to take? When are you meant to finalise a sustainable funding model proposal?
Senator, we were provided funding for that. Sorry, let me just pull that up.
I've got it over 3 years.
Correct, Senator.
So it's going to take 3 years to develop a model.
Senator,
so presumably the $3.7 million is just to develop a model. It's not to implement anything. It's just to develop a proposal.
Well, it is to look at the costings associated with those fees and charges, and then also progress through industry consultation to be able to provide advice on what any changes might be required.
I mean, 3 years does seem like a long time to develop a model. Is there some sort of interim targets or...?
Senator, I think what you're seeing in the budget papers is the funding is spread over 3 years, but it's only partial funding in the first and the third year.
Okay, so what is the time frame? When, as the Secretary or Minister said, I want a model produced by this date?
Senator, I think the original measure we were looking to the end of this financial year.
Right.
Yep.
So mid this year?
That was when the funding for that function was to.
Okay, and so when you're looking at the options here, are any options off the table to produce a sustainable funding model?
Senator, I'd say we're looking holistically at the exports, the cost base and the activities that go.
Has the government asked you to not consider a levy on the agricultural sector?
Not from me, Senator.
So we just heard from the Minister that the levy's not taking the election, but you're potentially developing a levy proposal with this funding. It hasn't been ruled out.
Deputy Chair, I think some options that will always be off the table would be any levies that went against things like WTO obligations. We would, of course, work with government around the policy parameters for that.
It just seems strange if the Minister just said that the government's not taking a levy to the election, and now we've got a planning committee that is potentially looking at a levy. How can the Australian people particularly the farming sector, have trust and faith here that there's not a secret levy being developed that will be revealed post an election?
There we go with the scare campaign again.
Well, just rule it out. Why wouldn't you have told that?
I did. I was clear about what we're taking to the election.
Secret levy planning in
we'll
the
continue to work constructively with farmers and producers who benefit from a strong biosecurity system to ensure that we've got appropriate funding in place. But a levy is not something we'll be taking to the election. The legislation will not be reintroduced.
The problem is the words there, they're quite weasel words, not taken to an election. It doesn't.
I said it won't.
It doesn't mean you haven't got your department
after the election,
working on the post-election implementation
I also
strategy.
said it will not be reintroduced.
Sorry?
I also said it will not be reintroduced.
So why is your department working on it?
Obviously, the funding that was committed to that was done before we withdrew the legislation in the Senate last week.
Who's running the show, Minister?
We are.
Doesn't look like it.
I think that
back to
look, we've established that the minister has not ruled anything out, but given your comment, I just did. No, to the review. I mean, the issue is the instructions to your officials. One thing to say here in this committee that's good, and as I say, we welcome that. But it might be worthwhile for not you, Minister, but the Minister for Agriculture. To direct her officials to act consistent with the policy you've outlined here today, because that's not clearly the message they've got. The 95.5 million that has been allocated over 3 years to support the functions, can I just get a breakdown of what that money is going to?
Senator, in its broad sense, it is being used to offset the deficit within the current exports arrangements, or the under recovery of our current fees and charges. So that would cover a range of costs within those fees and charges.
So it's not necessarily going to anything specific. It's just filling a deficit that you've got. Is that?
Well, if in terms of... I
suppose, just to explain myself, my understanding of our discussions previously is that the current fee structure does not fully recover all of your costs.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Is this funding then just to fill that gap?
Correct.
Okay. And that will take you through for 3 years on these projections. So for 3 years you will be fully cost recovered after you account for this funding.
That is the intent, Senator, and obviously that is dependent on things like volumes, because if volumes do change.
Okay.
But that will take us through to 30 June 2026. Okay. So through additional estimates, there was that funding was continued for the next financial year.
Okay, all right. I've just got one more set of questions, and I might go to Senator Brockman. In regards to the international trade situation, since the election of President Trump, there's been a lot of conjecture about new trade barriers. Is the department doing any work assessing the potential impact on Australian agriculture from increased trade barriers across the world?
Deputy Chair, we are, and that work is being led out of the part of the organisation that reports or answers questions under Outcome 1, so happy to come to that under Outcome 1.
Oh, right, okay.
Yep.
All
It's not being done by the Chief Finance Officer.
All right, okay. Well, I'll wait till then. Different committees do things differently. Okay, well...
Senator Brockman?
Senator Brockman.
All right, Senator Brockman.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to confirm the number that's been in the media about the advertising for the sheep transition package. Have we got the right people at the table?
We can comment on the procurement and the numbers here, and then for the content we can go to Outcome 1. But I'll ask the Chief Operating Officer and others on procurement.
Senator, I can confirm that the total cost of the live sheep, the full value of the contract is 2.3 million, which is published on AUSTender. The full responsibility for the budget and the program sits with Deputy Secretary Lowe, who can answer everything about the program in Outcome 1. But we can
and it's correct that that's gone to a company called Universal Media?
Universal McCann, yes, that is correct.
And can you tell me about the tender process, how that company was selected?
So Universal McCann are a part of the panel arrangement that is administered via the Department of Finance.
So they were just selected from a panel? So what, did it go out to a tender, even a limited tender?
I will ask my First Assistant Secretary, Michelle Wellington, to come to the table.
Good morning, Senators. Michelle Wellington, First Assistant Secretary, Strategy, Performance and Engagement. To answer your question, Senator, Universal McCann is the government's mandated sole supplier for media placement for all advertising. Mandated supplier.
Across, sorry, just this department or across all government?
Across all of government.
Oh, okay, there you go. What forms of advertising are included in this, or should that be, is that outcome one?
Outcome one.
Okay. And what's the duration of the contract?
The contract commenced on the 16th of December and concludes on the 28th of February.
And the scope of the contract, do you have that, or is that outcome one?
Outcome one, Senator.
I think might leave it there then.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think you got more questions?
Senator Brown's got some questions.
questions.
Oh, it doesn't look like it, Chair. Come on, put the phone down.
It's fine. Thank you, Senator McKenzie. Please. I mean, we don't have a, we don't need his commentary, right? It's just early in the morning now. Senator Brown?
Senator McKenzie's always out to help me.
I know she is.
I am, Senator Brown.
And I like to help you as well.
This is true. This is true.
I just want to ask a couple of questions about your graduate program. You've got a cohort this year. Do you want to tell me how many? Well, just give me the basic update.
Yeah. So they've just commenced, Senator, and I'll ask our Chief Operating Officer to go to the detail. Or the 2025 cohort has just commenced, I think, last week.
Thanks, Senator. The graduate cohort this year, we have 37 in total, and that also includes our Indigenous apprenticeship program as well. And in good news, the graduates have commenced in Canberra. There's 10 in Canberra, 11 in Melbourne, 9 in Sydney, 7 in Brisbane, and we have 2 graduates also in Canberra and 2 in Cairns as part of the Indigenous apprenticeship program.
Okay. How long does the program go?
The graduates complete a 12-month program, and it's across all. They're able to select a number of streams throughout the department as part of their rotations.
Okay, thank you. I now wanted to. I understand that the National Emergency Management Agency's relocated. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. NEMA have taken up floor space in Agriculture House.
Okay, so why was that decision taken? And
maybe that is.
Was there any positives? Well, I'm assuming there was some positive reasons for the relocation.
We work closely with NEMA.
Who else is in Agricultural House?
Just the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry.
Oh, right, okay. So your NEMA is now co-locating?
That is correct, Senator. They're occupying of 2 floors of our building,
okay.
A floor and a half at the moment.
And when did they go? When did they move in?
They moved in the second half of last year. It was around October and November they started the moving in process. And the benefit to the department is $18.6 million across the life of the contract to our budget bottom line.
Right, okay. So why was the decision taken, did you say?
It's a decision of NEMA to look to consolidate their footprint, and we were able to provide space within our building.
You have a team of officials who are engaged in whole of government emergency responses as well?
Yes, we do, and they work closely with NEMA across a range of items.
So, okay, do you want to?
Yes, so we have a team of 24, and they coordinate a number of responses from everything from weather events to, at the moment, they're assisting with the HPAI bird flu response.
Okay. My last question is about the increase in staffing levels as part of the election commitment on biosecurity. Can you outline the roles of these staff, the location and some of the outcomes? You don't have that?
We've got, we've had 167 biosecurity staff commence. But
Senator, I'm happy to take you through the ASL that was provided as part of the sustainable budget decision in the 23-24 budget. What I won't have is the location of those staff.
Is this the biosecurity?
Correct.
Okay. If you give me those details.
Now, I will caveat this, Senator, that in any given year there will be fluctuations in measures, but the direct part of that decision, there was 588 in 23-24, 185 in 24-25, and 167 in 25-26.
Right, okay. And are you able, you know, obviously having those extra staff has been extremely helpful?
it is extremely helpful. Protecting Australia's border, I don't think can be underestimated the value if we were to have a significant outbreak of a biosecurity outbreak in Australia.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks a lot, Senator Brown.
Thank you, Chair.
Senator McKenzie.
Are the 477?
I do, Senator. So,
thank you.
Yeah, year to date to the end of January, 25.5 million.
25.5
million.
And so, how much is budgeted for next financial year for that increase? Like, what is budgeted for this to the end of June?
In terms of the total departmental employee budget.
But the extra 477.
Senator,
are you able to split? What's your top? Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm going to be able to give you
okay.
the total for those specific. I'm happy. I do have the total departmental employee budget, if that's helpful.
So, of the 477 new staff, what band? You won't be able to give. Well, you might be able to.
I don't have that on me, Senator, but it's fair to say they'll be for a range of different positions.
Are there any SES level roles?
I'm not aware that there are, Senator.
Mr Fennessy, you haven't appointed...
I'm not aware there'd be any new additional or ongoing SES roles.
And have you got anybody acting in roles at the moment?
We'd have to come back to you on that.
Well,
we do have some people acting.
Yeah, who? In the SES space. I don't need who, I need numbers.
Yep.
We've got 7 temporary SES positions in our structure at the moment, Senator, and the majority are temporary and expire. Under their current arrangements conclude on the 30th of June at the end of this financial year.
And so how much do the 7 temporary roles cost to the 30th of June? How much have you budgeted for that?
So they'll be paid for out of because they're across the department in different groups. So we will...
But there will be...
We'll get you a total cost.
So I just want to know how much you've accounted.
Yeah, Senator, we'll endeavour to pull that for you. We'll have to make sure...
Well, don't leave. If we end in corporate, they're not to leave, Mr Fennessy, till they've got me that number. That'd be great. Now, I just want to go to travel. Did anyone in the department attend COP16 in Colombia?
COP16 Colombia, we'll have to confirm that.
That's why I'm asking.
Yes, we may have sent 1 or 2 officers as part of the whole of Australian government delegation.
We'd have to ask Trade.
Yeah, so that's an outcome 1 measure which we'd be happy to answer then.
Will they have the costs to the budget though, Mr Fennessy? I don't want to wait for the officer to tell me what they did when they were in Colombia, only to never find out how much it cost.
They should be able to speak to the costs.
Have you found it, Mr Gason?
No, we are finding the cost for the SES, Senator.
Okay. So how many... We don't know how many we sent?
We can confirm that under outcome 1. My recollection is either 2 or 3 officers.
Of what level, Mr Fennessy? Did any department secretary go? Anyone from your executive team?
We'll have to come back to that in outcome 1, just because I don't have that information.
But you can't recall?
It was not a senior delegation,
Okay.
but we may have sent an assistant secretary.
Okay,
Yep.
got it.
Yep.
What about COP in Azerbaijan? Did agriculture send anyone?
I think similar. So sorry, Senator, your first COP was
Colombia?
Colombia. So I think...
Is that biodiversity?
Yes. So I'll just to correct the record, I know we sent some officers to Azerbaijan.
Mm-hmm. How many?
I think that was the 2 to 3 that I was referring to. I was getting my COPs confused. I'm not aware if we sent anybody to the one in Colombia. So we definitely sent at least 2 or 3 officers to Azerbaijan. Your reference to COP, that I was thinking about the climate change related COP, not the other one that you referred to.
Okay, Ms Bishop, I think
Senator,
you might have
I'm advised that we did not attend Colombia.
Colombia.
Yep.
No one from Ag. And 2 to 3 in Azerbaijan, but who will be able to tell me about that? I think Ms Bishop's found the right page in her briefing pack.
I understand that we sent 1 SES officer, 1 EL, so 2 staff, 1 SES and 1 EL2.
1 EL2.
To Azerbaijan.
Okay, and how much was the cost of that?
I'm just getting that one, sorry. We will have to get that for you.
Why don't we just get the international travel line item rather than...
Senator, I've got total international spend if
Great.
there's assistance. So for
it would be of
financial year to 31 December, international travel expenditure is $3.2 million.
$3.2 million from the 30th of June to the 30th.
Yeah, 1st of July to 31st of December.
31st of December. And how much have you budgeted for international travel between the 1st of January and the 30th of June 25?
I'll get that for you, Senator. I don't know whether I've got the year-to-date figure on me.
I don't need the year-to-date. I need how much you've actually put in the bank to pay for this half of the financial year.
So, Senator, we currently have a full year budget of $10.7 million.
And do you anticipate meeting that budget?
Senator, I would expect so, yes.
Okay. Well, that's going to look like you've got a pretty hefty second half the financial year, $7 million to be spent. So is that inclusive of accommodation?
That would be, Senator, yes.
And does that include ministerial travel?
No, Senator.
No. Do you have a ministerial budget line item for international travel?
No, I don't, Senator.
Who pays for that?
I need to check. So international travel expenditure, Senator, is Independent Parliamentary Expenses Authority.
Yeah, but does
For international travel, IPIA pays?
That's what I've got in front of me, yes.
Yes, that's correct, Senator.
I'm happy to check that though, Senator.
I would check that. I find that fascinating. They do our travel allowance to Hobart and to Honiara, it would seem. Okay, if you could check that. And what travel has been done by the Minister, the former Minister, or any of the Assistant Ministers in this financial year?
Senator, we don't have the details of the...
You don't know when your Minister's overseas, Mr Fennessy?
We do, but
Good. Good.
we do. We don't
like
have
major KPI.
Yeah, we don't have the detail relating to the travel. It sounds like at the table, but we will. I think
usually when a minister travels overseas, not for her own personal reasons, there would be departmental staff that accompany her, or if any of the assistant ministers have been over.
Yes, we certainly have that detail. I was just saying we don't have the cost details.
Why don't we tell me what I want to know, which is, has the minister or any of the assistant ministers in this portfolio travelled overseas in this financial year?
So
Thank you,
Minister Collins has recently completed a trip to Europe, I believe, and I believe it was London.
It was an agriculture and food forum in Berlin.
The FAO?
I don't think it was related to FAO, but it was an international...
The GFFA.
Thank you. Everyone's got the answers now, haven't they? Okay, so Minister Collins, was she accompanied by any departmental staff, Mr Fennessy?
She was.
How many? Did IPIA pay for it all?
In terms of... So she was accompanied by one of our overseas staff and at least one staff from Australia, but we can get the details.
Could someone find the line item for that trip and tell me how much it cost? And not send me to the Parliamentary Expenses Authority.
For the cost to the departmental staff?
For the cost of the trip to Europe for your minister and whatever associated costs. I'll wait.
We can get the line item for the department officer, but I don't think we will have the minister's.
My understanding it was one staffer went with the minister and one SES officer from the department, and they were supported by an overseas counsellor.
Thank you, Ministerial Office, for that information. So one SES from the department, one Ag counsellor, I assume, from Europe.
Correct.
And is that the only trip for any of your ministers, Mr Fennessy?
I can confirm the Assistant Minister has not been on an overseas trip.
Thank you, Assistant Minister.
In this
I
term
do
of
appreciate
government.
it. Mr Fennessy, I'd really like you to be able to show this committee that you know where your ministers are, if they're in the country or not.
Yep.
Is this the only trip?
Yes.
No, it's not.
Sorry, Secretary. The Minister has completed 2 international trips. So one was also to the APEC ministerial meeting in Peru in November.
Peru? And when was that one?
In November.
Yep.
And that one, the Minister was representing the Foreign Minister at that one.
Okay, right. Thank you, Assistant Minister. Might get a pay rise and be the Secretary. And, sorry, she was accompanied by Foreign Affairs staff because she was representing the Foreign Affairs Minister, or Ag staff?
No, when the Minister travelled to Peru, she was not accompanied by any department staff.
Yep.
And I'm
assuming
she had an advisor.
Yeah, thank you.
It was DFAT stuff, but Senator, the APAC meeting for officials, we sent staff to that, but I think that was a separate timing. Officials meet beforehand, so we didn't send people to Peru.
Did you go to that one, Mr Fennessy?
No.
So that's part of the $3.2 million? The APEC staff?
If it was departmental.
Yeah, the departmental would be part of that.
I'm asking. I'm assuming, but I don't
Yes.
Right.
Well, it would be part of the departmental spend, and if that covers that period you referred to, it will be part of the 3.2.
Yes, thank you. I just had some questions about productivity across the department. What sort of measures are you undertaking to ensure increased productivity in the work of your department? Mr Fennessy?
I think in general, our productivity measures are against the funds under budget papers. We've also undertaken a range of digital upgrades to a lot of the processes we have for export and other. So there's a range of productivity measures. In terms of budget paper measures that we're funded for, Mr Geisen?
They don't need to be budget papers. I'm looking at your management.
Yeah, so we work through our corporate plan, a statement of strategic intent. The main areas of productivity...
Is productivity and efficiency one of the things that you explicitly look at
yes.
in that plan?
Yes. So In my opening statement, I referred to the capability review that talked in particular about the productivity of the department as it relates to regulation, engagement with external stakeholders and industry, and in particular how we process regulatory permits for exporters and importers. Yep.
Good, because getting product to port and onto plates overseas is the name of the game. I'm just wanting to understand some concerns that have been raised with me from exporters about decisions by your department, particularly as it relates to ports, that staff only work in daylight hours, even though ports, as Infrastructure Shadow Minister and anybody that understands ports know, are 24-hour operations. Can you outline for the committee the impact that your decision to have staff only operate, DAF staff to only, biosecurity staff to only operate on daylight hours? What's the impact on industry productivity and profitability?
So with biosecurity operations, I certainly have the correct officials here for outcome 2.
This goes to the impact of your decisions on viable agriculture businesses who are just trying to export.
Yeah, and so what I can say, and this is where I will ask the biosecurity officials, is the long-term approach out of Australian Border Force and DAF is to do pre-clearance for incoming imports and pre-clearance for outgoing. So that allows us to provide those services in a way that's not related to a 12 or 24-hour cycle in general.
Mr Fennessy, the industry hasn't raised concerns about the pre-clearance process. They're wanting to understand why for a 24-hour-a-day export facility like a port, your decision to see DAF staff, biosecurity staff, only working daylight hours, what is the impact on industry of your decision?
That's
not the
where
pre-clearance process. I was very clear. It's about the daylight hours only decision.
So the officials who can answer that will answer that under outcome 2, because I don't think our...
So you don't know, do you?
I work very closely with our Deputy Secretary of Biosecurity and the Director of our Operations, but I don't take their operational decisions for them.
Do you understand the impact of your Department Secretary's decisions on the profitability and productivity of Australian agriculture?
Yes, and so through myself as well as our Deputy Secretary of Biosecurity, we've convened our Sustainable Biosecurity Funding Advisory Panel, where we meet directly with those importers and exporters, and I attend those meetings. And I also attend meetings with exporters from time to time around Australia to hear directly from them.
Mr Fennessy, the decision to have biosecurity staff only work in daylight hours at Australian ports, what impact has that had on industry?
So, to answer that question, the relevant officials will speak to that under outcome 2. The overall approach to biosecurity is risk-based, so it will depend on the cost and the benefit.
Only happens in the daytime?
It will depend on the best allocation of our resources, which is something that is worked through our operations team in biosecurity. So
the inefficiency has cost the cattle industry in live exports up to $26,000 in additional costs, lost revenue per shipment because of your decision. Will you commit to actually review the daylight hours only biosecurity measures if that is actually proven correct?
So I referred to that Biosecurity Sustainable Advisory Funding Panel. We now publish the allocation of all of our cost recovered funds. We do that with industry, and we have to be very transparent so that any investment returns benefit to whomever the exporters would be.
Why are biosecurity staff only working in daylight hours? Is there only a biosecurity risk at a 24-hour-a-day port during daytime?
Well, I'd want to have our biosecurity officials go to the
It's a pretty simple question.
details. So our role in protecting biosecurity risk ranges across livestock, horticulture, grains. There are many different ways we provide those services. So
Minister, do you think biosecurity risks only present themselves during daytime?
Well, what about the complete hypocrisy from yourself? A minister in the former government that let cut biosecurity funding by $100 million.
Why are your officers only working in daytime?
Has such a bad record of actually delivering on a sustainable biosecurity funding model that we've worked hard to overcome and have a proud record of implementing.
Let the Minister answer, please.
Have a proud record of implementing.
Thank you, Senator
with the
McKenzie.
support of many across the industry.
Well,
you brought in a container levy.
Senator McKenzie, it's the Minister. Okay, thank you.
Live exporters across
Senator
the country.
McKenzie, you don't have the call. Senator McKenzie. All right, well, we'll just suspend. All right.
Let's do it.
Now, Minister, did you have anything else? Otherwise, I'll go back to the opposition.
I'm just going to conclude with they did nothing to actually ensure that importers were paying their fair share of the biosecurity levy. Brought in a container scheme that didn't actually deliver one extra cent, whereas we've delivered sustainable biosecurity funding that the industry knows will be there to support them, and that's exactly what the Australians expect of us.
All right, thanks. Now, Senator Duniam.
Are you still going?
Get Tim.
Senator.
No, he has.
Okay.
Senator Duniam, you've got the call.
And Senator McDonald. Just in terms of, we deal with sort of cross-portfolio stuff here. And legal drafting, chief legal counsel, etc. The letter from the Prime Minister dated the 15th of February to the salmon industry, making a commitment around laws. Are you familiar with that, and can I ask about that here?
I am familiar with that. I don't think our legal or corporate team they didn't have anything to do with that. So we're happy to talk to that under outcome one in terms of the general issue. But
Secretary, this isn't a general issue. It's quite specific, because the letter from the Prime Minister specifies this department as being a part of a group of agencies that will be, in his words, working to introduce legislation to ensure appropriate environmental laws are in place to continue sustainable salmon farming in Macquarie Harbour. So it would go to, and in fact the letter only refers to PM&C, who I asked about this yesterday, and DAF, and it relates to the drafting of legislation. Where else would I ask about that?
Outcome one has been, so we're very involved in that, just not through our Chief Operating Officer or our Chief Finance Officer.
So previously we've asked about legal matters, including drafting of laws here, but we'll do that in outcome 1 now?
That's correct, yeah. Particularly because that's that legislation sits in another department, so we wouldn't get involved in.
Does it sit in another department?
The
So is that what's proposed? Because I asked both the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water and PM&C, and no one knew where it's at.
Yeah, so I think we have been involved in it through Deputy Secretary Matthew Lowe under Outcome 1, but not in terms of, from what I understand, the drafting of it. But we can speak to that under Outcome 1.
Yeah, and Deputy Secretary Lowe is here today?
He will certainly be here for Outcome 1.
Okay,
yep.
All right. Thank you. Well, I'll come back in Outcome 1 then.
Senator McDonald, did you want to try and see where we go with your lots of questions?
Thank you. So my questions are with regard to the funding of NAFI, the Northern Australia Fire Instrument, which I understand is a cross-portfolio funded instrument. Can you tell me where you're up to with that?
So, Senator, was that the Northern Australia
Fire
Instrument,
yeah.
NAFI? I don't think we are involved in that, looking at my officials.
I'm not aware.
No, we haven't been involved in that.
Okay, so the agents, the instrument, NAFI, says that you do. So
NAFI.
That's fabulous. It's a 4-year budget federal item. It's cross-funded between the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water, National Emergency Management Agency, the Department of Defence, the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, you, and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And it manages fire in Northern Australia, fire measurement.
It might be something we're involved in through, we certainly do a lot of work with NEMA in emergency management. It may relate to some of our Northern Australia Indigenous investment, which is an Outcome 1 measure, but I'm not aware of any funding contributions through our Chief Finance Officer, although I will ask the Chief Finance Officer to comment.
Senator, no, I'm not aware of that one, but if it would be in the outcome that the Secretary has mentioned.
Okay. Thank you. Chair, that's it.
Okay. Senator Mackenzie or
Thank you.
Deputy Chair?
Just following up on my previous line of questioning, I'm specifically talking about changes at the Port of Broome and the Port of Darwin, Secretary. You have been made personally aware of these issues. You're nodding, and yet when I ask you questions, you are unable to answer them.
Yes. So, Senator, we can speak to some of the broader...
I'm asking for you to speak. I don't...
Yep, I can speak to the broader workplace health and safety issues. My understanding is under our enterprise agreements, safe workplaces will relate to the occupational conditions of work. At some ports that includes daylight hours for unloading of vessels and inspection. So that is relevant. With the Port of Broome, I'm aware that we from time to time get involved in funding if new biosecurity staff have to be funded. So I'm very much aware of that. Particularly Port of Broome as an expanding, identified as an expanding port. We could, I can ask our Chief People Officer to give you evidence on the workplace health and safety aspects of shifts, if that assists.
It would, because the level of frustration is high, because additional costs are being incurred loading and waiting for biosecurity clearance. If the vessel arrives after 3 p.m, that becomes an issue. Housing cattle, feeding, etc., holding them is in excess of, as I understand it, $20,000 a day. And then exporters are reporting delays of up to 70% of their shipments are delayed because of these changes. That's tens of thousands of head of cattle that are not being exported as a result of the decisions of this department in these places. So coming and talking about all the productivity gains you like, whilst industry, you're shutting down the live sheep trade And similarly, under this government now, the live cattle trade is having significant impacts to their profitability and sustainability simply because you've only got your biosecurity officers operating during daylight hours. I want to understand why that decision was made, and I'm concerned that you weren't aware, even though you have been made personally aware, of those impacts, and you weren't able to verbalise that to this committee.
So I'll ask our Chief People Officer to talk to our obligations under work health and safety.
I want to understand why our biosecurity officers are only working in daylight hours. That's all I want to know. I don't want to know every program you've got under the sun to ensure safe workplaces, because I assume you do that as a function of law.
Yeah,
what I want to understand is how you're negatively impacting agriculture.
So, Chief People Officer.
Senator, I could probably elaborate a little, but some will go to obviously the biosecurity people that make the decisions around this. But with us, obviously, as the Secretary said, there's work health and safety risk assessments. My understanding in relation to this is more so about the ability for light to be there to actually undertake the inspections, like sufficient light so they can see the potential biosecurity risks and hazards at those locations. So it is a long-standing principle at all our locations, if the light isn't there, to sufficiently undertake those. So that's my understanding about the rationale.
So we can have
the
people if we have the lamps.
Well, I believe
light.
so, yes. If we had the light, like, the workforce would need to be potentially recruited because it may move into shift arrangements and the funding issues, obviously, in the parameters, but it's about the WHS and ability to undertake those inspections at the moment in those locations outside of daylight hours.
Secretary, I assume you wouldn't want these sort of negative impacts of agriculture. Is that correct? Can I take that as a given?
Yes, that is correct. And at the same time, I have to comply with work health and safety outcomes and then the risk-based approach to funding biosecurity services. So that's the range of factors we take into account.
Well, it seems you're prioritising some things over others. What changes, given that this has been highlighted to you today, again, what changes can you make or commit to making?
So one thing I will recommit to is that every dollar of investment in biosecurity funding we make transparent through that new Sustainable Advisory Funding Panel. We work with industries, including the live animal industry, the grains industry, about best investment of levies that we collect from them to reinvest. So that's where the trade-offs and the discussions are made transparent around biosecurity risk, workplace health and safety, export opportunity and risk, value of markets, because, and I'm sure you'd appreciate, how do we compare grain trade to some parts of the world to animal trade to horticulture? So that's why we have all of those industries as part of that panel. And I know we work, for example, with Cattle Australia very closely in that panel. So we make transparent the obligations and trade-offs for our biosecurity operations, and Deputy Secretary Justine Saunders chairs that panel, and I'd be very happy to get her to speak to how we make transparent those trade-offs and those cost-benefit investments as part of outcome 2.
Because as it stands, Secretary, given this government's appalling decision to close down the live sheep trade, and for the coalition to be continually saying that the live cattle trade's next, it seems that this type of decision-making that is being made by the government's agricultural department negatively impacting the profitability, efficiency and productivity of the live cattle trade, it would be hard for them to feel supported by this decision, its impact, or indeed your response right now that they're going to be part of some panel and someone's going to have a chat to them to explain their own industry to them.
We know we're going to get a lot of scare campaigns today, and we just get a lot of another one from
there's
Senator
more.
Mackenzie. The Minister Collins was in the Northern Territory.
One at a time, just one at a time.
Minister Collins was in. I'm responding to.
Yeah,
Senator
I know you are, but just one at a time, please.
Minister Collins was in the Northern Territory last week and engaged with cattle farmers up there in the industry and reiterated her strong support for live cattle export. And that is something that this government, from the Prime Minister down, has been consistent and committed to.
You know what? It's a bit like your weasel words on anti-Semitism. You've got a lot of nice words, but when the rubber hits the road, they're still losing money per shipment because they cannot get the cattle onto vessel and to leave.
Your hypocrisy on biosecurity is absolutely breathtaking, given your record in government.
Senator McDonald, did you want to squeeze in there with one, please?
It's just, Mr Fennessy, you've talked about the workplace health and safety things that you're considering, but have you considered what the animal welfare issue is when you're leaving cattle in yards for longer than necessary, and you're exposing the workforce, the cattle industry's workforce, to having to work out of hours to feed and to monitor cattle in the yards? Does this not seem unreasonable that the government's not willing to put in place some systems that allow them to work at the times when the stock are there and they need to be attended to?
Senator, that is a very important consideration as well. It's the human workplace health safety factors, the animal welfare outcomes, and that is, as senators would be aware, regulated through the SCAS process. Export, I cannot remember what that acronym stands for, but SCAS is our export regulated pathway for livestock. That's critical to those export markets, so that is important factor.
It just doesn't seem to have been taken into consideration if you're just saying you're only considering the workplace health and safety, when surely a generator and some lights would solve the problem.
Yeah, and we are considering a range of factors, including cost benefit, value of market, animal welfare and work health and safety. And that panel that I described before, that transparency panel, has been meeting now for or since last year. So it's not a proposal to make that transparent. We've already published those, all the costs. It's really important that we support as productive and profitable in industry as possible in terms of the live cattle export.
It seems a simple solution.
Thanks, Senator McDonald. Deputy Chair.
I just want to go back to the Minister's trip to Europe. Did the Minister meet with any EU officials on that trip?
My understanding is she did, and we can talk to that in outcome one, but my understanding is she did meet with EU officials.
Right. Did she raise concerns around the EU deforestation regulations with those officials?
I'll ask our outcome one officials to go to the specific briefing, but I know that's been a constant priority that we raise with EU officials. So,
my understanding is the Minister did with the EU Ag Commissioner.
She did raise these issues. Great. Okay, thank you. All right.
Senator McKenzie.
Was I waiting? I was waiting for some figures.
Put in a photo for the good senator here.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator, you were asking about the 7 temporary SES roles. The estimated cost for this financial year, $1.97 million.
1.97 million. Excellent. Thank you.
And Senator,
I had another one.
Networks.
I need to keep a list.
No, I apologise. Our networks meet quarterly.
Okay, very orderly. Thank you. No.
Okay. Is that it for corporate? Yes.
Oh, sorry. The ANAO audited the financial statements of Australian government entities. Can someone answer these questions for me?
Yes, sir.
Getting some nods. Okay.
So the ANAO did identify 4 key areas of financial statement risk, including financial stability, accuracy and completeness of own source revenue relating to import and export functions, valuation of loans to state and territory governments and farm businesses, accuracy and completeness of the primary industry levies and charges revenue. The ANAO found a decrease in the net cost of services of $133.6 million. And departmental revenue from contracts with customers, $584.9 million. They also found the complexity of IT systems used to calculate and collect levies and charges cost $625.8 million. How does DAF ensure the accuracy and completeness of its own source revenue from import and export functions, given the complexities of numerous revenue streams and the reliance on third-party data?
Senator, those risks that the ANAO has identified, it's fair to say that they're consistent risks year on year that they raise with us, and that's the area of their audit focus. With regards to those, that revenue that we recover, it is quite diverse and does come through a number of systems, but all of those systems undergo a high level of scrutiny for their accuracy by the ANAO. We have a range of IT controls within that. And then more broadly across our financial statements, we have a governance framework where there is a financial statement steering committee that oversees the preparation, execution and review of any findings that might arise or ANAO observations, and we report in from an internal CFO perspective, report into that committee and then also into the audit committee to provide them I guess a level of awareness around how we are managing that revenue and those key risks identified by the ANAO.
So the decentralisation of your revenue collection is a problem, and trying to marry and manage all of that.
I wouldn't identify it as a problem, Senator. I'd say
what language would you use?
It is certainly complex and requires the appropriate controls around that to ensure the accuracy of it.
What steps are you taking to address some of that complexity?
Senator, we are looking with all of our systems to make sure they are, modern and meet the relevant IT security environment. But fundamentally, all of those systems, they have their own implicit controls within them to ensure there's differentiations of access that assist in ensuring the information that gets put into those systems, and then that is reconciled into our central finance system. So all of those systems are reconciled regularly, and those reconciliations are reviewed by
Is there any
ANAO.
efforts being put into simplifying the multiple IT systems that are involved in recording import and export transactions?
We certainly have the STEPS program, which stands for Simplifying Transactions or Trade, and we've just had that's gone through multiple gates to make sure that we're. Okay, we can ask our Chief Information Officer to speak to that, Senator.
I just need to know you're doing something about it, Secretary, and I would like to think that the Secretary of the Department can answer these type of questions.
So we're certainly, as a priority, investing in our STEPS system, and we've just had it gateway reviewed. Given the inherent risks with IT projects, we're working very closely with Department of Finance, Digital Transformation Agency and across our organisation.
So you need some resourcing from Minister Gallagher to actually fund nothing?
No, we don't need the resourcing.
You've got the steps up and going, we just need to implement?
It's the assurance to make sure that it's going to be implemented in a...
And Senator, we do have an active program where we are looking at those systems and simplifying them. We have what we call a revenue integration program, but it is in its very early stages, so we are looking at it.
Okay, and there is a plan in place to address their complexity.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
No, thank you.
On that note, are we done with corporate?
We are.
All right. Did we want to maybe have our morning tea now and then? Or, yeah? All right. Let's do that. Corporate. You all right? Oh, okay. I feel a bit of a heart attack. All right. We're going to now break for 15 minutes and then we'll move to outcome one. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Chair.